5, 4, 3, 2, unité, top.
And
Allumage
liftoff.
EAP, décollage.
Décollage, liftoff from a tropical rainforest to the edge of time itself. James Webb begins a voyage back to the birth of the universe. Punching a hole through the clouds, 20 seconds into the flight, good pitch program reported.
A few weeks ago on Christmas Day, European scientists and engineers pulled off a truly remarkable achievement. After more than 20 years of planning, designing, and testing, the James Webb Space Telescope, a joint venture between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency, finally took to the skies, as we just heard in the voices of the ESA flight director and the NASA commentator. The James Webb will expand our knowledge of the universe in ways we don't yet know. Unlike the Hubble Space Telescope, which observes in visible light, James Webb will observe in infrared, or what we most often call heat. And while the Hubble orbits only 500 kilometers above the Earth, the James Webb will be parked 1.5 million kilometers away, 3 times as far away from Earth as the Moon. The extraordinary achievement is that the launch carried out by the crew at Europe's spaceport in French Guiana near the equator was so precise that the telescope has had to use very little of its own fuel to get to its observation point. And this has extended its expected lifetime from 5 years to at least 10 and possibly even 20 years. Many people in the EU's capital followed this launch with great interest, but none more than the astronomers at the Royal Belgian Observatory who have booked time on the James Webb to carry out fundamental observations of our galaxy. The Royal Belgian Observatory is a large research complex in a quiet residential district of Brussels. And later in this episode, we will hear how it is part of another spectacular mission that will collide this year with an asteroid in order to protect planet Earth. Also in today's episode, is Europe more urban or more rural? How can cities help save food production for future generations? And a lesson in courage from the Mayor of Cologne, winner of the first Pawel Adamowicz Award. I'm Sean O'Kearney, and this is Letter from Brussels, bringing you stories about the EU's capital city and about the leaders building the Union from the ground up. It's brought to you by the Renew Europe Group in the European Committee of the Regions. Nearly 13 years ago, the world reached a major milestone. For the first time in the history of humanity, there were more people living in cities than in rural areas. This is neither good nor bad per se, and this development no doubt presents human society and its political leaders both with opportunities and also challenges. But the divide between rural and urban areas has grown and is causing concern. So much so that when she took office 2 years ago, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made a direct link between this divide and the health of democracy, and she gave Croatia's Commissioner, Dubravka Šuica, a new portfolio called Democracy and Demography. In Europe, the urban population surpassed 50% decades ago and is currently around 70%. The pandemic has slightly reversed the trend, with some people deciding that life in the countryside is better when faced with restrictions of freedom due to public health emergencies. But Cécile Gallian, mayor of the French municipality of Vorey in south-central France, warned during a debate with European Commissioners Dubravka Šuica and Janusz Wojciechowski, who is in charge of agriculture, that this new trend of leaving cities to the countryside has not been observed everywhere. Mayor Gallian pointed out that 80% of the EU's territory is rural, and while only 30% of the Union's population lives in these areas, that still represents 137 million people. She highlighted that rural areas are facing drought and aging populations, and that the European Union needs a rural agenda just as it has an urban agenda, so that cohesion is preserved and reinforced from the social, territorial, and humanist perspective. The chair of the COR's Natural Resources Commission, Ulrika Landergren of Kungsbacka City Council in Sweden, reinforced the message highlighting the urgent need to close the digital gap between cities and countryside, so that all children can have quality education, local authorities can provide services efficiently and effectively, and rural businesses can connect to the internal market. The urban-rural divide won't mean much to any of us if our ability to produce food on this planet disappears. As a species, humans are rapidly discovering that we have taken another kind of species for granted, the pollinators, the many different types of insect that pollinate crops and wild plants. As the European Commissioner responsible for the environment, Virginijus Sinkevicius, wrote in a letter a year ago, the insects that pollinate crops and wild plants are in serious decline. The functioning of ecosystems, our food security and well-being are at risk. Losing pollinators would be a major risk for nature and our own existence. Renew Europe's Frida Nilsson of the Swedish town of Lidköping pointed out that there is also an urban-rural divide when it comes to protecting biodiversity and specifically pollinators, and that cities can and should do more. In her report presented to the COR plenary, she wrote that, in a world of expanding cities, the protection of biodiversity and ecosystems must become a part of urban planning, and that urban areas can contribute with botanical and residential gardens, planting trees, and even the rehabilitation of industrial and historical sites can be used to increase the population of pollinators. Renew Europe MEP Martin Hojsik took the idea further, encouraging mayors and regional leaders to go beyond the creation of pollinator-friendly spaces, and creating instead pollinator-friendly cities, villages, and regions, because, he said, at the end of the day, we need the whole of Europe to be friendly to pollinators, because then and only then will the situation be friendly to us humans. Coming up in a few minutes, the inspiring message from the Mayor of Cologne, who promotes tolerance in her city despite having suffered a shocking assassination attempt. And we hear how the Royal Belgian Observatory will help protect our planet from an asteroid. But first, some news in brief. The Conference on the Future of Europe continues its work at a steady pace, consulting citizens on their vision of the European Union in the 21st century. The final report is expected in May this year. Speaking at the COR plenary, Renew Europe MEP Sandro Gozzi announced that one of the requests coming from citizens is to be able to vote directly for the European political parties. This, he explained, can be achieved via transnational lists of candidates at the European elections. The president of Renew Europe in the COR, François de Coster, vice president of the French region of Hauts-de-France, added that citizens at the conference are showing a real commitment to democracy, and their proposals for more education about democracy and more citizen participation must guide us going forward, and that COR members are ideally placed to energize European democracy by involving citizens in their communities. Congratulations to the Portuguese Liberal Party, Iniciativa Liberal, which after only 3 years of existence has jumped from 1 MP in the Portuguese Parliament to 8 at the recent snap elections. And congratulations to the amazing 19-year-old Zara Rutherford from Brussels, who has just become the youngest female pilot to fly around the world solo, and the first woman to do so in a microlight aircraft. She took up this challenge to encourage more women into aviation. Zara hopes to become a European astronaut one day. On the morning of the 17th of October 2015, Henrietta Recker was at a political campaign event in the market square of the German city of Cologne, just one day before the mayoral elections, in which she was a candidate. A man came up to her and offered her a rose in a friendly manner. And then in a flash he pulled out a 30-centimeter knife and stabbed her in the neck. She fell to the ground and saw that she was bleeding from the mouth and nose. The man was arrested, and Henrietta Recker was rushed to hospital, where she spent several days in coma. At the trial, the man, who admitted to having been a member of a neo-Nazi group, said that he attacked her because she was open to welcoming refugees to Germany, and that he wanted to create a climate of fear. Mayor Recker recovered, but was not able to take up her elected office for several months. Once she took up office, she demonstrated incredible resilience and determination to prove that Cologne is a tolerant city. She set up an office for prevention of intolerance and exclusion, and another office for inclusion. She has supported NGOs that monitor and combat hatred, that work to reduce inequalities and promote education, as well as intercultural understanding. Today, Cologne is host to 6,000 refugees. On the 27th of January this year, Mayor Recker was presented by the European Committee of the Regions with the first Pawel Adamowicz Award, which honors the former mayor of the Polish city of Gdansk, who himself was assassinated 2 years ago in January 2019 by an extremist. In her acceptance speech, Henrietta Recker honored Mayor Adamowicz's courage in establishing dialogue with people who were close to tolerance, and she said, "Our response to such violence can only be that we will not hate, we will not stoke hatred, we will not be intimidated, and such threats will make us even more ambitious in standing up to ensure continued diversity and peace in Europe. Diversity is part of our DNA in Cologne. It is our trademark and our message to a globalized world." Paying tribute to her, Renew Europe's Kate Feeney of Dunleary Rathdown Council in Ireland said, "In an increasingly polarized world, it is not always easy to stand up for those who have no voice. Unfortunately, standing up carries a risk. So when people do stand up, it is important that we recognize their bravery and we celebrate them. The award to Henrietta Recker today is not only our way of recognizing her commitment, against great risk, to the values held so dear by Pawel Adamowicz, but it is also our way of showing that we stand with her.
5, 4, 3, 2, unité, top!
On the 11th of April 1996, a researcher in Arizona, United States, discovered 2 twin asteroids about 10 million kilometers from Earth. 25 years later, in November 2021, NASA launched the DART mission to intercept the asteroids by crashing into one of them. The collision is scheduled for 8 months from now, at the end of September 2022. The asteroids present no danger to our planet, but the purpose of the mission is to test technologies that might need to be used one day, if ever Earth is at risk of colliding with an asteroid that could cause a mass extinction similar to the collision that wiped out the dinosaurs that roamed our planet 65 million years ago. The collision between the DART spacecraft and the smaller of these 2 space rocks will happen at a speed of 24,000 kilometers per hour, and its echo will be heard in the EU's capital city. Of course, not literally. The echo will be a stream of data that specialists at the Royal Observatory of Belgium will be analyzing, and the neighbors of the quiet residential Euclid district will be able to go about their lives without disruption. The analysis of the data will help prepare the European Space Agency's Hera mission, which will launch in 2024, to go inspect the site of the collision. The development of planetary defense technologies is another ESA and NASA collaboration. There is little to see when approaching the Royal Observatory. The large research complex is embedded in a small wood, with a tall fence running all the way around the perimeter. Outside the main entrance, there is a statue of Belgian King Baudouin, who was passionate about astronomy and space exploration. Standing at the statue, one can see several small observatories and a number of nondescript buildings which house the researchers. If ever you find yourself walking by the Belgian Royal Observatory, or any other observatory, be it during the day or especially at night, stop and look up at the sky, and think about the scientists inside who, together with thousands more around the world, are scouting our solar system to protect us and future generations, or who are peering into the deepest, darkest depths of the universe in order to expand our knowledge and our understanding of ourselves. If you are enjoying this podcast, you can subscribe on most major podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube. If you think others might enjoy listening or subscribing, please don't hesitate to tell them about it. Thank you.